Before the first stone is laid, there must be vision. A measure taken not just of the land, but of the purpose. So too in life, we must survey the landscape of our challenges and potential. Marcus Aurelius counselled, seek objective judgment now at this very moment. Unselfish action now at this very moment. Willing acceptance now at this very moment of all external events. That's all you need. Clarity precedes construction. The ground does not yield easily. Obstacles arise. Rocks, debris, the stubborn earth itself. Yet the path forward demands their removal. This friction is not failure, but the process itself. Remember the emperor's wisdom. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Every cleared stone strengthens the resolve to continue. Upon the cleared earth, a foundation must be set. Solid, deep, unwavering. This is the bedrock upon which all else rests. Like this road, a life requires a firm inner foundation, built not on shifting sands, but on enduring principles. Dig within, Marcus urged. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig. Build your character first, and the structure will hold. The materials of construction demand effort. Heavy stones, the weight of the task, borne by diligent hands. This labour is not a curse, but the currency of creation. Concentrate every minute like a Roman, advised the philosopher king, like a man, on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice. Each stone moved is a step towards the goal. Beside the road, a wall rises, providing structure, boundary, perhaps protection. It is a shaping of the environment, an assertion of order against chaos. So must we build our inner citadel, reinforcing our principles against the tide of external pressures. Be like the promontory against which the waves continually break, Marcus Aurelius wrote, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. Water, like fortune, can erode or destroy if not managed. Channels are dug to guide the flow, anticipating challenges, ensuring the road endures. Life too requires foresight, managing the currents of emotion and adversity. You have power over your mind, not outside events, Marcus knew. Realize this and you will find strength. Prepare the channels for life's inevitable downpours. A mark is made, a purpose etched in stone. Not for vanity, but as a testament to the work, a declaration of intent or dedication. Our actions, too, carve inscriptions upon the world and upon our own souls. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be, Marcus declared. Be one. Let your deeds be your inscription. Order must be maintained. The legionary walks the path, a symbol of duty, discipline, vigilance. He embodies the steady commitment required to uphold the structure, be it an empire or one's own character. Strive for that perfection of character, Marcus wrote, to live your last day every day without frenzy or sloth or pretense. Walk your path with unwavering duty. The day's work is done. The road stands, a testament to effort and purpose. Now, a moment of quiet reflection. True satisfaction is found not in the completion alone, but in the knowledge of labour well spent, of purpose pursued. As Marcus understood, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Find peace on the path you have built.